I saw Avatar Fire and Ash on its opening Thursday night. It was quite the experience for a lot of reasons. It's the third chapter in James Cameron's Avatar saga, a saga seemingly beloved by many. Me, not so much though. The movies are obviously highly visually impressive. I'm not saying anything no one hasn't said before, but it's next level technology with those first two films to bring the world of Pandora to life. And just the technical precision behind it is unbelievable. It's the story and the characters that have just never really done it for me in these films, whether it's the human characters or the Na'vi. And the stories are either just cookie cutter familiar, like the first film, or thin and stretched out to unnecessary lengths like the sequel, The Way of Water. It's insane to me that movie is as long as it is, when 40 to 50-ish minutes are taken up by lingering shots of characters swimming or just showcasing underwater. Don't quite understand the phenom myself. I would still say I like enough of the first movie, but after finally rewatching The Way of Water again last week, gotta say I feel meh about it. But both movies made over $2 billion, with the first film being the highest grossing film of all time, so me, I guess. That was also the reaction I had when it was confirmed this sequel was gonna again top 3 hours, with an official runtime of 3 hours and 12 minutes. But the time in that auditorium was gonna be extended because of some can't miss trailers and previews that were gonna be in front of the movie. So the total time was gonna be about 4 hours of sitting in that auditorium, which has gotta be my personal record. Clearly this franchise is in its last Airbender era, as we go from the water-themed second film to the fires of the third film in Avatar Fire and Ash. Saw the film on Thursday night in IMAX 3D. It was a pretty packed auditorium, as everyone in there knew it was either go big or go home with seeing this movie in a premium format. Before I talk about the movie itself, a film like this is always going to have some tentpole film trailers that play in front of it, but this particular experience was going to be special because of some theater exclusive previews that are going to be playing in front of the film, including two of the biggest films coming out in 2026. The first exclusive one was a preview of Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey. Apparently what was shown was the opening of the film. I've heard the official word on it is that it's a 10-minute preview. I don't know if it was that long, but it showcased a Trojan horse type invasion by some soldiers and then a battle that takes place after. It was a great preview. It looks fantastic in IMAX. There's just a special power behind Christopher Nolan's filmmaking. And when the preview was over, everyone realized the same thing, that is going to be a can't miss experience. The preview I, and likely many, were most excited for was the first look of Avengers Doomsday. I avoided all the leaks over the last week in terms of seeing any pictures, although I did see headlines on what character was going to be focused on during the preview. At this point, there's no point in avoiding talking about the obvious, but skip ahead if you want to avoid that info. But the trailer is focused on Steve Rogers, and it was kind of a weird creative choice. When it was reported that we were going to get our first look at Doomsday 1 year before the film came out with the trailer in front of Avatar Fire and Ash, I wasn't expecting a full-on theatrical trailer. That'd be crazy with a year till the movie releases. But I thought a Force Awakens original teaser type trailer would have been appropriate. What was shown here was just a little segment of a scene of Chris Evans back as Steve Rogers during a time when he was back with Peggy Carter after the events of Avengers Endgame. It was a cute moment and it was cool to see some footage. Overall, it wasn't the most exciting thing to see, but it did its job to make the audience, and myself to some degree, anticipate what's to come next. Apparently there's going to be a few more Doomsday character-focused trailers like this, so there will be more to see before we get the first official trailer that comes out for the film. After the Doomsday clock ticked off, then it was off to Pandora again for another 3 hours. In Avatar Fire and Ash, the Sully family continues to evade the military, led by Colonel Cordage, while a new threat in the Fire Raiders threatens Jake's family as well. Getting the obvious out of the way, the movie continues to be ultra impressive visually. The rendering and graphics just get even better with this installment. Doesn't matter whether it's the action scenes, the fire or water showcases, or just showcasing these Na'vi characters. The likely crazy money spent on this film shows in every frame. There was a weird creative choice I noticed early on, where some shots during the opening were a higher frame rate. Thankfully that didn't continue throughout the movie, as that would have been pretty distracting. Something that's not talked about enough when it comes to these films is the work from the actors. Doing these films is somewhat of a thankless job, because you're a part of this insane mocap filming experience, and pretty much all of your notable actors end up in blueface. But I thought the performances were just so good from everyone. Your main players in Sam Worthington, Zoe Saldana, Sigourney Weaver, and Stephen Lang, and all of your younger cast were all excellent here. What became obvious this time around is that part of the reasons the performances were so good this time around is that the characters are just way better in this installment. I mostly found everyone to be pretty boring in the previous movies. There just wasn't anything all that interesting with the character cliches of the first film, and the second film didn't have time for a lot of character stuff, as most of the focus was on swimming and water. The characters this time around just feel more natural. It's hard to describe, but I think there's just better and more interesting character dynamics this time around from everyone. There's a lot of worthwhile growth from everyone that you feel in a variety of ways. Didn't much care for the cliche son proving himself to his dad's story, but everything else is pretty worthwhile here. Most of it's centered around the human kid Spider that's part of the Na'vi family, and he goes through a very interesting transformation himself that drives a big part of the story. There's a lot of differences in terms of how all the characters in this film feel about him, the most interesting of which is Neytiri, based on how the last film ended. And of course there's him dealing with his father, the Colonel. But that Spider Kid is just super likable, to where it's understandable why all the characters in this movie go through the trouble they do just for him. I think the movie's best scene was a notable moment between Spider, Jake, and Neytiri, where at the end I thought, holy shit, they did the unthinkable for me here with these films, which was make me actually care about the characters. Aside from Spider, Colonel Cordage and his interactions with Jake were very interesting this time around. When it got to these moments, I thought, oh, now this is interesting, and the catalyst for some worthwhile character stuff when it comes to the general and the whole Na'vi culture. Colonel Cordage, still played by Stephen Lang, is both the best and worst character. He's highly entertaining with some of his one-liners and is a source for some of the film's best laughs. And credit where credit is due for the character going under a transformation when it comes to the Na'vi culture. But the bad part is how it's still a never-ending cycle when it comes to him stuck in his ways in terms of his relentless pursuit of Sully. And that never-ending cycle with the character leads to a never-ending cycle with the story and how it all goes back to his mission to get Jake. His character was at his best when it comes to his dynamic with a new threat in the Fire Raiders, led by a female Na'vi named Varang. This character was pretty badass in her look and dialogue, albeit a bit basic in how she's turned on by fire and sky people weapons, aka guns. It's when we see extended interactions with her and the general that at first I felt, whoa, are they really doing this? It was odd, but just what this movie needed to be more interesting character-wise. All of the good character stuff and story progression led to the movie's best segment, which takes place at the Humans military base. Everything that took place here was just amazing. I won't go into all the particulars as that would spoil it, even though there was a glimpse of it in one of the trailers. But anyways, everything that took place during this extended military base sequence was the movie's peak. I loved the character moments, and the action was just incredible because of the setting and the 3D effects. This part of the movie was just so hype, and I looked at my watch and realized, there's over an hour left in this film. What fills the final hour of this movie is the film basically doing a combination of the first and second film's final battles. The action here, like the rest of the film, is very well done, but it just gets so damn repetitive because it goes on forever. It's a long battle, and it's not doing much different than what was seen in the previous films. That's what was so good about the military base sequence, was how fresh and new it felt because of the setting, and also that Fire Raider sky battle at the beginning of the movie. What was annoying here is that once again, a decent amount of the movie is devoted to water themes, whether it's more swimming or environmental stuff already seen in part 2 with the whales. Naturally, you don't see as much of the swimming stuff as there was in The Way of Water, but when it is there, and there is a decent amount of it, that and the whale stuff, it's just taking away from the most interesting parts of the story, which was the human kid and also the colonel and the fire tribe. I was pretty exhausted by that 3-hour length because that's a lot of time sitting there, plus those previews that played before the movie. That doesn't mean I wasn't enjoying myself during a good amount of this film. A lot of what I liked this time around is because character-wise, this installment was so much better to go along with the great visuals, action, and 3D effects. It also was legit funny in a lot of moments. I could count on one hand the amount of legit laughs in part 1 and 2 combined. I'm not saying Fire and Ash is a comedy show, but they work in some nice natural humorous moments that help out greatly a film like this. 3 hours is just obnoxiously excessive, and that's because the story was excessive with a lot was what was seen in the final hour. In the big picture, I did like the movie, which for what it's worth is my favorite out of the 3. There's a lot of great vision to admire from James Cameron and the Avatar saga as a whole, even if I'm not the biggest fan of the films in their entirety. Although the movies are just too much in terms of all the content that's in there. The Way of Water could have easily been trimmed down to be a tighter film. I think that's this movie's issue, is that a lot of the boring water stuff with the whales or swimming getting in the way of the more interesting new character and story stuff. It does feel like an epic, although you don't need 3 hours to be on that level though. If these movies though continue to make the kind of money they do, then there's obviously no reason for Disney to tell Cameron to trim the films down for the next installments. That actually brings me to another issue I had with the whole ending battle segment here, is that it did feel really big and massive, which should be a good thing. But it had that feeling of a finale for a series with the kind of battle it was. If they cleaned up some loose ends in this movie, this film could have worked as an ending for the whole Avatar saga or trilogy, because the final battle did feel on that level. But with the knowledge that there's seemingly more films on the way, all I could think is where the hell else can they go from here? Because I can't imagine more story content to make up another 3 hours of story. But $2 billion later, and I'm sure I'll find out the hard way. So that'll do it for this review of Avatar Fire and Ash. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you for watching.
Your goddess has no dominion here.